A billionaire stands on a Texas tarmac, laughing at a woman in coveralls. He thinks she's just another mechanic. He thinks he knows everything about her in a glance. What he doesn't know is that in the next 15 minutes, she's about to take his breath away, literally, by launching a jet into the sky with nothing but her skill, her training, and decades of experiences money could never buy. And when she lands that aircraft, his entire worldview will come crashing down harder than he ever thought possible. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you looked, because of your gender or your race or the job you were doing? Smash that like button right now, because what happens next will remind you why assumptions are the most expensive mistake you can make. The private airfield sat just outside Houston, where the afternoon heat created waves that shimmered across the concrete like water. Rows of aircraft lined the tarmac. Everything from vintage prop planes that belonged to museums to sleek modern jets that looked like they could break the sound barrier just sitting still. This wasn't a commercial airport with crowds and security lines. This was where serious money came to play, where executives sealed deals at 30,000 feet, where aircraft weren't just transportation, they were statements. And on this particular afternoon, Trent Wallace had arrived to make his own statement. Trent was a self-made billionaire investor, the kind of man whose name appeared in Forbes articles about aggressive takeovers and calculated risks that somehow always paid off. He'd built his fortune by identifying struggling companies, buying them at bargain prices, and either flipping them for profit or gutting them for parts. Some called him a visionary. Others called him a vulture. He wore both labels like badges of honor. Today, he'd come to inspect a potential acquisition, an aviation training company that had been operating since the 1970s, but was now struggling to compete with newer, flashier competitors. The business had legacy, reputation, and experienced instructors. It also had outdated equipment and mounting debt. Trent saw opportunity. He arrived with his usual entourage. 2 financial advisors analyzing spreadsheets on tablets, a lawyer reviewing contract clauses, and a business reporter from a regional publication documenting his latest expansion into the aerospace sector. They move as a unit across the tarmac, their dress shoes clicking against concrete, their tailored suits looking absurdly formal against a backdrop of grease stains and aviation fuel. Trent led the pack, gesturing broadly as he talked. "Look at this place," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's like a museum. No one serious flies prop planes anymore. This whole operation needs a complete overhaul, new equipment, modern training modules, probably half the staff." He laughed, and his associates laughed with him, because that's what associates do. They approached one of the older hangars, where several aircraft sat in various states of maintenance. Trent paused near a vintage jet, running his finger along the fuselage and examining the dust it collected. "Dinosaur technology," he muttered, shaking his head with practiced disdain. His eyes swept the area, cataloging assets and liabilities, calculating value with the cold efficiency of someone who'd done this 100 times before. Then his gaze landed on something that made him smirk. Standing near one of the jets was a woman in practical coveralls, her hair pulled back, a tool belt around her waist. She was focused on an open panel, checking something with methodical precision, completely absorbed in her work. Ever met someone who sized you up in seconds and decided they knew your entire story? Someone who looked at your job, your clothes, your appearance, and thought they had you figured out? Drop a comment below. We want to hear your stories, because what happens next proves why that's always a mistake. The woman's name was Dr. Kira Lawson, though no one there knew that yet. She was a maintenance consultant filling in for the day, while the company's lead engineer handled a family emergency. The work was simple for someone with her background. Routine checks, system diagnostics, the kind of thing she could do in her sleep. She heard Trent's group approaching, but didn't look up immediately. She was in the middle of calibrating a pressure sensor, and precision mattered more than politeness. Trent noticed her and saw exactly what he expected to see. A mechanic, someone whose name he'd never learn, and whose expertise he'd never need to acknowledge. In his world, people like her were interchangeable. Skilled labor, sure, but ultimately replaceable. He walked closer, that familiar smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. His entourage followed, sensing entertainment. "So you're the mechanic?" Trent said, his tone carrying that particular brand of condescension that people with money sometimes mistake for charm. Kira closed the panel she'd been working on and turned to face him. She didn't hurry. She didn't straighten defensively. She simply looked at him with calm, dark eyes that had seen things he couldn't imagine. "Today I am," she replied evenly. Trent gestured at the jet behind her, a model from the late 90s that had seen better days but was still fundamentally sound. "Think you can get this thing off the ground? Maybe I'll make you rich if you manage it without blowing something up." His friends chuckled. The reporter's pen moved across the notepad. Most people, faced with that kind of mockery, would have gotten defensive, would have tried to explain themselves, or walked away with wounded dignity. Kira did neither. She smiled. Not a polite smile. Not a forced smile. A genuine smile that suggested she knew something they didn't. "Hand me the keys," she said quietly, "and let's see if you're serious." The words hung in the air for a moment. Trent blinked, caught off guard. He'd expected her to be flustered or to decline or to make some excuse about company policy. He hadn't expected her to call his bluff. "You're joking," he said, but his tone had lost some of its edge. "Do I look like I'm joking?" Kira held out her hand, palm up, waiting. Trent glanced at his associates. The lawyer looked uncomfortable. One of the financial advisors raised an eyebrow. The reporter leaned forward, suddenly very interested. Something in Trent's competitive nature couldn't back down. He'd made the challenge publicly. If he retreated now, he'd look weak in front of his own people. So he reached into his pocket, pulled out the keys the company manager had given him for the inspection tour, and placed them in Kira's hand. "This should be interesting," he muttered. Kira's fingers closed around the keys. "Yes," she said softly. "It should." She turned and walked toward the jet with the kind of purposeful stride that comes from doing something thousands of times. The group followed, no longer laughing. They were curious now, maybe a little nervous. What Trent didn't know, what none of them knew, was that he just challenged the wrong person. And in about 15 minutes, he was going to learn a lesson that no MBA program had ever taught him. Kira moved around the aircraft with practiced efficiency, and something shifted in the way she carried herself. Gone was the casual mechanic, checking routine systems. In her place was something else entirely, someone who knew this machine intimately, who understood every rivet and wire and hydraulic line. She performed the pre-flight walk-around with textbook precision, checking control surfaces, inspecting landing gear, running her hands along the fuselage in places most people wouldn't know to look. Each movement was deliberate, economical, the muscle memory of someone who'd done this so many times it had become instinct. Trent and his entourage watched from a safe distance. The initial amusement had faded into something more complex. Uncertainty, maybe, or the first stirrings of realization that they might have misjudged the situation. "She actually knows what she's doing," one of the financial advisors whispered. "Apparently," Trent replied, but his voice had lost its swagger. Kira climbed into the cockpit, and through the windows they could see her settling into the pilot's seat, adjusting it with the familiarity of someone returning home. Her hands moved across the instrument panel. Switches, dials, digital displays, each touch purposeful and sure. The engine coughed once, then roared to life. The sound was massive, visceral, the kind of deep rumble you feel in your chest cavity. Everyone on the ground instinctively took a step back. Everyone except Kira, who sat calmly in the cockpit running through her checklist like she was ordering coffee. Through the headset, she communicated with the tower, her voice crisp and professional, using terminology and procedures that made it clear this wasn't her first time, or her 100th. The jet began to move. She taxied with the smooth confidence of someone who understood weight distribution and momentum, who could feel through the controls exactly how the aircraft wanted to move. Down the taxiway toward the runway, the engine noise modulating as she adjusted thrust, everything controlled and precise. Trent's mouth had gone dry. He wasn't smiling anymore. The jet turned onto the runway, lined up with practiced accuracy. There was a brief pause, that moment before commitment where pilots make their final checks and verify that everything is ready. Then she released the brakes. The acceleration was immediate and dramatic. The jet surged forward, gathering speed, the nose lifting exactly when it should, the wheels leaving the ground in a textbook-perfect rotation. Clean, smooth, beautiful. They watched it climb, banking slightly to the left, gaining altitude with steady purpose. The afternoon sun caught the metallic surface, turning it into something almost ethereal against the blue Texas sky. Nobody spoke. Kira took the jet through a series of maneuvers. Nothing reckless or showy, just clean demonstrations of control. A gentle bank to the right, a smooth climb, a descent that showcased her understanding of energy management. Each movement communicated mastery, the kind of flying that makes experienced aviators nod in recognition and respect. The reporter had stopped taking notes. He was just watching now, jaw slightly open. One of the financial advisors said quietly, "Who is she?" Nobody answered because nobody knew. The flight lasted about 8 minutes. Not long enough to be excessive, but long enough to make the point undeniable. Kira brought the jet around in a wide circle, lined up with the runway, and began her approach. The landing was perfect. Not good, not adequate. Perfect. The kind of three-point touchdown that student pilots practice for years trying to achieve. The wheels kissed the concrete with barely a whisper, the aircraft settling onto the runway with the grace of a bird coming to rest. She taxied back to the hangar, shut down the engine with the same methodical precision she'd used to start it, and climbed out of the cockpit. If you're feeling that satisfaction right now, that vicarious joy of watching someone prove their worth, hit that subscribe button, because we're just getting to the best part, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Kira descended from the aircraft, removed her headset, and set it on the wing with casual care. She looked exactly as calm as she had before the flight, as if taking a jet into the sky and demonstrating perfect piloting technique was just a normal part of her afternoon. Trent rushed forward. The smugness was gone from his face, replaced by something between shock and genuine awe. His carefully constructed persona had cracked, and underneath was just a man trying to process what he'd just witnessed. "Who are you?" he asked, and for the first time since arriving, his voice carried no condescension, just raw curiosity. "Who are you really?" Kira handed him back the keys. Her expression was neutral, but there was the faintest hint of satisfaction in her eyes. "I'm a former Air Force test pilot," she said evenly, "and the aerospace engineer who helped design the navigation system you just laughed at." The words landed like a physical blow. Silence stretched across the tarmac. The entourage stared. The reporter's pen was moving again, frantically now, capturing every word. Kira continued, her voice steady and matter-of-fact. "I graduated top of my class from the Air Force Academy. Flew combat missions in 2 different theaters. Spent 7 years as a test pilot for experimental aircraft, the kind of planes that don't have instruction manuals because we're writing them as we go. Transitioned to aerospace engineering because I wanted to understand not just how to fly planes, but how to build better ones." She paused, letting that sink in. "The navigation system in this aircraft? I was part of the team that developed the civilian adaptation from military technology. The pressure sensors you saw me checking? I wrote part of the diagnostic protocol that maintenance crews use worldwide. I consult now because I prefer solving real problems with my hands rather than sitting in boardrooms talking about solutions." Trent looked like he'd been hit by a truck. His face cycled through emotions, embarrassment, disbelief, the dawning horror of realizing he just publicly dismissed someone whose credentials made his business degree look like a participation trophy. I had no idea. He managed." "You didn't ask," Kira replied simply. "You looked at me and decided you already knew everything you needed to know. My coveralls told you I was a mechanic. My gender maybe told you I couldn't possibly know as much as you. My race perhaps suggested I didn't belong here at all. You made assumptions, and assumptions made you look foolish." She wasn't angry. That was somehow more devastating than if she had been. She was just stating facts, the way you might comment on the weather or note the time of day. One of the financial advisors found his voice. "Dr. Lawson, I apologize on behalf of—" "Don't." Kira cut him off gently. "Your apologies don't mean anything. What means something is what you do next. How you treat the next person you meet who doesn't fit your assumptions about what expertise looks like." The lawyer was staring at his shoes. The other financial advisor was on his phone, probably already Googling Kira's name, and realized with mounting horror exactly how accomplished she was. Trent ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of genuine distress. Would you be willing to? We're launching a new aerospace venture, and we could really use someone with your... I know, Kira said. I read about it. That's actually why I took this consulting shift. I wanted to see if your company was worth working with. And you just failed the interview, she said. But you can retake it if you're serious about change. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that credentials and competence don't always wear a suit, because the most qualified person in the room is often the one nobody's paying attention to. The story spread through aviation circles like wildfire. Within 24 hours, Kira's demonstration had become legend. Pilots shared it in crew lounges. Engineering teams discussed it over lunch. Industry forums debated not just what happened, but what it meant. Trent Wallace did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He issued a public apology, not through a PR firm or a carefully worded press release, but in a personal video where he looked genuinely humbled. He admitted his assumptions, acknowledged his disrespect, and invited Dr. Kira Lawson to serve as technical advisor for his company's new aerospace venture. Kira accepted, not because she needed the money. Her consulting work paid well, and her military pension was solid. Not because she needed the credibility. Her reputation in aerospace circles was already sterling. She accepted because she saw an opportunity to ensure that competence and expertise would have a seat at the table. To make certain that the next woman or person of color in coveralls wouldn't face the same dismissal she had. The partnership proved more successful than anyone anticipated. Kira's technical expertise identified problems that would have cost the company millions. Her connections in the aerospace community opened doors that Trent's money alone couldn't access. And perhaps most importantly, her presence changed the culture. People started asking questions instead of making assumptions. They started listening to the quietest voices in meetings. They started measuring worth by expertise rather than appearance. But the real lesson isn't about one billionaire learning humility or one company improving its culture. The real lesson is about something more fundamental. Never judge competence by appearance, gender, or race. The person wearing coveralls might have more degrees than you. The woman doing maintenance might be able to fly circles around commercial pilots. The quiet person in the corner might know more about the subject than everyone else in the room combined. You simply cannot determine someone's capabilities by looking at them. Real confidence doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. True skill speaks through action, not words. Kira didn't tell Trent who she was because she didn't need his validation. She proved it by doing something he couldn't do, taking that jet into the sky with textbook precision and landing it with grace. The people doing the actual work often know more than the people writing the checks. There's a reason for that. Hands-on experience teaches lessons that no classroom or boardroom can replicate. The person in the trenches sees problems that executives in corner offices never imagine. Wisdom lives in unexpected places, and smart leaders know to listen for it. Respect must be earned through demonstration, not demanded through position. Trent had wealth, influence, and power. Kira had skill, knowledge, and experience. On that tarmac, in that moment, only one of those things mattered. And it wasn't the one Trent thought. Kira didn't need anyone's permission to be excellent. She didn't need Trent's approval or his offer or his recognition. She was already complete, already accomplished, already exactly who she needed to be. The flight wasn't about proving herself to him. It was about reminding him that excellence exists independent of his ability to recognize it. That day on the tarmac, the richest person wasn't the one with the tailored suit and the entourage and a portfolio worth millions. It was a woman in coveralls who knew exactly who she was and didn't need anyone's permission to prove it, because real wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or stock portfolios. It's measured in competence, in knowledge, in the quiet confidence that comes from mastering your craft so completely that doubt becomes irrelevant. If this story inspired you, smash that like button right now. Tell us in the comments. Have you ever shocked someone by revealing who you really are? Have you ever been underestimated and then proven them spectacularly wrong? We want to hear your stories. And subscribe to Earthly Tales, because the best stories don't just entertain us. They remind us that greatness doesn't announce itself with trumpets and fanfare. It demonstrates itself through action. And the most important people in any room are often the ones we're not paying attention to. Remember, the next time you meet someone new, don't assume you know their story. Ask, listen, pay attention, because the person you're dismissing today might be the expert you need tomorrow. And by then, they might not be interested in helping you anymore.